He wasn't supposed to survive. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Somewhere warm, I hope, because up here, the air cuts like broken glass and silence weighs heavier than stone. The morning hadn't fully arrived yet, just a thin gray light stretching across the ridgeline of Montana's northern cliffs, where the wind moved slow and cold, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. A wheelchair sat at the edge for a moment longer than it should have, its metal frame catching the pale dawn, one wheel still spinning softly, as if time itself hadn't decided what came next. Then it tipped forward and vanished into the open air below, swallowed by fog that clung to the mountainside like a secret no one wanted to tell. There was no scream, no echo of panic, just the quiet rush of wind and the faint scatter of gravel slipping over the edge, falling into a place too deep to measure in feet or fear. And then nothing. Nothing but the sound of a single bark cutting through the stillness. Ghost had been watching. He always watched. From the tree line, where shadows still held onto the last breath of night, the German shepherd stood frozen, his amber eyes locked on the empty space where his human had been. His chest rose once, sharply, as if the world had shifted under his paws, and for a moment, even the wind seemed to pause with him. He didn't bark again. Not yet. His ears stayed forward, his body tense, every instinct pulling him toward the edge, toward the place where something had just been taken from him. The cliff dropped nearly 100 feet, jagged rock breaking through patches of frost and scrub below, a place no one walked down and no one climbed back from easily. The fog curled thick in the gap, hiding what waited beneath, turning distance into mystery, turning fear into something quiet and patient. Ghost stepped forward, one paw at a time, careful but certain, the ground crunching softly under him. The scent was still there, faint but real. Steel, dust, and the familiar trace of the man who had never once left him behind. The world didn't feel right without that presence. It never had. Somewhere beyond the trees, the morning carried on like nothing had happened. Birds tested the air with hesitant calls. A distant road hummed miles away. Life, indifferent and steady. But up here, on this narrow stretch of rock and silence, something had broken, and only one witness remained. Ghost reached the edge and looked down, his body still, his breath steadying into something deeper than fear. He did not understand betrayal. He did not measure justice. He only knew one truth, simple and unshaken, the kind that doesn't bend even when the world does. His human was down there, and that was enough. The wind brushed past him again, colder now, carrying a faint sound from below, something fragile, almost lost in the distance. Not a call, not a cry, just the smallest sign that the story wasn't over yet. Ghost's muscles tightened. For a single heartbeat, he hesitated, not from doubt, but from instinct weighing the fall, the distance, the unknown. Then that moment passed, quiet as it came. Some choices aren't taught. They're remembered. And this one, he had made before. The wind did not ask for permission. It moved across the cliffside with a steady, patient force, slipping between stone and bone, carrying with it the faint scent of pine, cold earth, and something else now, something human, something fading but not gone. Ghost stood at the edge for only a second longer, his gaze fixed into the gray void below, ears forward, body aligned with a decision that did not need words. Then he stepped off. Not a leap driven by panic, not a reckless fall, but a controlled descent guided by instinct older than training, older than fear. His paws struck against the uneven rock face, claws finding brief holds, shoulders absorbing the impact of each drop as he moved downward through ledges and narrow outcroppings, his body weaving through the jagged slope with a precision born from years at his handler's side. Gravel shifted beneath him, small stones tumbling past into the fog, disappearing into the quiet below. The air grew colder as he descended, thicker, heavier, wrapping around him like a warning. But Ghost did not stop. He had followed this man through worse. Through heat that shimmered over desert sand. Through nights where the only light came from distant fire and distant hope. This was no different. This was just another path. Halfway down, he paused on a narrow shelf no wider than a kitchen counter, his chest rising and falling steadily, his eyes scanning through the haze. The scent was stronger now. Blood, faint but unmistakable. Fabric, metal, And beneath it all, the scent he knew better than his own. Ethan. A low sound escaped Ghost's throat. Not quite a bark, not quite a whine. Something deeper, something pulled from the place where memory and instinct meet. He moved again, slower now, more deliberate, each step measured as the slopes steepened and the fog thickened. The world narrowed to a few feet in front of him, shapes emerging only when he was close enough to touch them. A broken branch, a patch of frost, the edge of a rock that dropped into nothing. And then, finally, a shape that did not belong to the mountain. Ethan lay against a cluster of stone near the base, his body still, his wheelchair a few yards away, caught against a jagged outcrop as if the mountain itself had decided to hold on to it. The silence around him was complete, broken only by the distant whisper of wind threading through the canyon. Ghost approached slowly, his steps soft now, cautious, as if the wrong movement might cause the moment to disappear. He lowered his head, pressing his nose gently against Ethan's shoulder, then his chest, searching for something he could feel, something he could trust. For a second, there was nothing, just cold fabric and colder air. Then, faint and fragile, a movement, a breath so shallow it almost did not exist. Ghost stilled, his entire body focused on that single rhythm, his ears tilting forward, his breath sinking unconsciously with the one he had found. Alive. The word did not exist in his mind, but the meaning did. Alive meant stay. Alive meant protect. Alive meant do not leave. He circled once, careful of the uneven ground, then lowered himself beside Ethan, pressing his body close, sharing warmth against the creeping cold that settled into the rocks. His fur caught the dampness in the air, his breath steady against Ethan's side, a quiet presence anchoring something fragile back to the world. Time moved differently here. Minutes stretched. The light above shifted slowly from gray to pale blue, filtering weakly through the fog, but down here, it barely reached them. Ghost did not sleep. He watched. Every small change in breath. Every subtle shift. His ears tracked distant sounds, a bird overhead, the faraway hum of something human miles away, but nothing came close enough to matter. Once, he lifted his head and let out a single bark, sharp and clear, the sound cutting upward through the layers of fog and stone, a signal sent into a world that might or might not hear it. Then he settled again, quieter now, conserving what mattered. His nose brushed Ethan's hand, nudging it slightly, not to wake, but to remind. You are not alone. The cold pressed in, slow and steady, but Ghost adjusted, shifting his body, blocking the wind where he could, creating a small pocket of warmth in a place that offered none. Hours could have passed, or minutes. The mountain did not measure time the way men did. But Ghost remained, unwavering, his presence constant, his purpose simple. Stay, wait, guard. Somewhere above, beyond the fog and the silence, the world continued without knowing what had happened here. But down in the shadow of the cliff, something refused to end quietly. And as the faintest hint of warmth began to touch the edge of the air, Ethan's fingers twitched, barely noticeable, a movement so small it could have been missed by anyone who was not watching with his whole being. Ghost saw it, and this time he did not bark. He simply leaned closer, his head resting gently against Ethan's chest, listening, waiting, holding on to that fragile rhythm as if it were the only thing keeping the world from slipping away. The first sound Ethan hears is not the wind. It is not the distant echo of falling gravel or the hollow silence of the mountain. It is a rhythm, slow and steady, rising and falling beneath his cheek, warm against the cold that has settled deep into his bones. For a long moment, he does not understand it. His mind drifts somewhere between memory and nothing, caught in a place where time does not move forward, only circles. Then the scent reaches him. Faint at first, then clearer. Fur. Earth. Something alive. His brow tightens slightly, a small crease forming as awareness begins to return in fragments, like light breaking through heavy clouds. His fingers twitch again, this time more deliberately, brushing against something coarse and familiar. Ghost. The name does not come as a word, not yet, but as a feeling, a presence that has never once left him. In all the years that mattered, his breathing shifts, shallow but more defined now, pulling in the cold air that burns slightly as it fills his lungs. The world around him remains blurred, wrapped in fog and shadow, but the weight against his chest anchors him. Not the weight of pain, not the weight of fear, something steadier, something that refuses to move. Ghost lifts his head the moment he feels it, ears snapping forward, eyes fixed on Ethan's face with a sharp, alert intensity. The smallest change does not escape him. A breath that lingers longer. A muscle that responds. He leans in closer, his nose brushing against Ethan's jaw, then his cheek, a soft nudge, careful, measured, as if reminding him of something important. Stay? The mountain remains quiet, but it is no longer empty. Ethan's eyes flutter beneath closed lids, not opening yet, but no longer still. His mind begins to piece together what it can. The drive, the narrow road winding upward, the early light cutting through the trees. Vanessa's voice, calm, distant, almost rehearsed. There had been something in it. Not anger, not sadness, something colder. He tries to hold on to that thought, but it slips away, replaced by the sensation of falling, not the impact, but the absence of ground, the brief moment where nothing supports you and everything becomes uncertain. His breath catches slightly, a subtle shift that Ghost feels instantly. The dog presses closer, his body firm against Ethan's side, anchoring him again to something real. The fog above them begins to thin just enough for pale light to filter down in narrow strands, touching the edges of rock and frost, revealing the stillness of the place in soft detail. Ethan's hand moves again, slower this time, fingers curling just slightly before resting against Ghost's fur. The contact is weak, but it is intentional. Ghost does not move away. He lowers his head again, resting it gently across Ethan's chest, aligning his breathing once more, steady, patient, unyielding. Time stretches, but something has changed. The stillness is no longer absolute. It holds a pulse now, fragile but present. Ethan's lips part slightly, a breath passing through them with more strength than before, his throat working against dryness and cold. A sound tries to form, but it remains trapped, unfinished. Ghost listens anyway, as if the attempt is enough. Above them, far beyond the reach of sight, the world continues to turn, unaware of the quiet battle being held in this hidden space between stone and sky. A faint breeze shifts direction, carrying with it the distant echo of something mechanical, far off, barely there, but different from the natural sounds of the mountain. Ghost's ears flick toward it, then back to Ethan, unwilling to divide his attention for more than a second. His priority does not change. It never has. Ethan's eyes finally open, just a fraction, the light too soft and the world too unclear for him to fully see, but enough for him to sense the shape beside him, the warmth, the presence that has always meant safety, even when nothing else did. His voice comes out as little more than a breath, rough and fragile, but real. Ghost, it is not loud. It does not need to be. Ghost responds immediately, lifting his head, a low, steady sound leaving his chest, not a bark, not a whine, but something in between, something that carries recognition and relief without needing explanation. Ethan's eyes close again, not from loss, but from exhaustion, the kind that follows survival, the kind that comes when the body understands it has not been left behind. His hand remains where it is, resting against Ghost's fur, a connection that holds even as his strength fades in and out. And beside him, unmoving, unwavering, Ghost remains exactly where he has chosen to be, guarding not just a life, but the fragile line between what was almost lost and what refuses to let go. The sound reaches them again, clearer this time, not imagined, not mistaken, but real, a low mechanical hum carried through layers of rock and thinning fog, distant but steady, like something searching without knowing exactly where to look. Ghost hears it first, his ears lifting sharply, body tensing for just a moment before settling again beside Ethan, unwilling to move too far, unwilling to break the quiet vigil he has held since the fall. His gaze shifts upward, toward the pale slice of sky barely visible through the jagged walls above, then back down to the man whose breathing now carries a fragile but undeniable rhythm. Ethan does not fully wake, not yet, but he is no longer lost in that empty space between moments. His chest rises more evenly, each breath drawing in cold air that stings but sustains. The warmth at his side remains constant, grounding him in a way nothing else can. The mountain has begun to change. The light grows stronger, pushing through the fog in thin beams that touch the edges of stone and frost, revealing more of the narrow space where they lie. The wheelchair remains lodged against rocks several feet away, its frame bent but intact, a silent witness to what happened above. Ethan's fingers tighten slightly in Ghost's fur, a reflex more than a choice, but one that carries meaning all the same. He is holding on. Ghost lowers his head again, pressing closer, sharing warmth as the wind shifts direction and carries a sharper chill down the slope. Time passes in quiet increments, measured not by minutes, but by breath, by the subtle strengthening of something that had almost been lost. Then, from above, a new sound breaks through, sharper than the last, cutting through the air with purpose. Voices, faint at first, indistinct, but human. Ghost lifts his head immediately, eyes narrowing, body alert in a way that does not come from fear, but from recognition. He knows this pattern. He has heard it before in places where men moved with urgency, where something important was being searched for. He stands slowly, careful not to disturb Ethan, and steps a few feet away, positioning himself where he can be seen if anyone looks down, but still close enough to return in a heartbeat. He lets out a bark, strong and clear, the sound echoing upward against stone, breaking the stillness that had held this place for hours. It is not frantic. It is not desperate. It is precise. A signal. Above, the voices shift, reacting, their tones sharpening as they call back and forth, the words still too distant to understand, but the intent unmistakable. They have heard him. Ghost barks again, once, then pauses, listening, measuring the response. Ethan stirs at the sound, his brow tightening slightly, his eyes opening just enough to register light and movement. The world is still blurred, but he senses the change, the presence of something beyond the two of them. His lips part again, the effort visible now, his voice barely more than a breath. Stay. The word is soft, fragile, but it carries weight. Ghost turns immediately, returning to his side, lowering himself again without hesitation. His body close, his presence steady. He does not leave. He never has. The voices grow louder, closer now, accompanied by the shifting of loose rock above as careful steps make their way down the slope. A figure appears at the edge of the fog, then another, outlines forming against the light as they descend with controlled movements, guided by the sound of the dog and the faint signals of life below. They stop a short distance away, assessing, their posture cautious but focused, understanding the terrain, understanding the moment. One of them speaks, calm, steady, a tone meant to reassure rather than startle. Ghost watches them closely, his body still, his eyes sharp, not aggressive, but protective in a way that does not need explanation. He shifts slightly, positioning himself between Ethan and the approaching figures, not as a barrier, but as a presence that must be acknowledged. The man kneels slowly, careful, extending a hand not toward Ethan first, but toward Ghost, offering space, offering respect. Ghost does not move forward, but he does not retreat either. He studies the man, reading something beyond scent, beyond motion, something instinctive. The tension holds for a second longer, then eases, just enough. The man nods slightly, as if understanding has been reached without words, and turns his attention to Ethan, speaking again, softer now, confirming what Ghost already knows. Alive. Ethan's breathing steadies further as hands move carefully around him, checking, supporting, working with quiet efficiency. Through it all, Ghost remains close, never more than inches away, his eyes tracking every movement, every shift, ensuring that nothing breaks the fragile line that has held this moment together. The mountain no longer feels as empty as it did before. Something has changed. Not just the presence of others, but the quiet certainty that this story did not end in the fall. And as the light continues to grow, pushing back the last of the fog, Ghost lowers his head once more beside Ethan, his body still, his purpose unchanged, even as the world finally begins to reach them. The movement is careful, deliberate, as if the mountain itself is watching and waiting to see if they will do this right. Hands move with quiet precision around Ethan, not rushing, not forcing, just supporting what is already holding on. A thermal blanket unfolds with a soft crackle, catching the thin morning light. Before it is wrapped gently around his body, sealing in what little warmth remains. The air still bites, but it no longer feels like it owns him. Ghost watches every motion, his body low, steady, eyes tracking each hand that comes close, not with aggression, but with a kind of measured vigilance that has been earned, not taught. One of the rescuers speaks again, voice calm, steady, the kind that carries through chaos without adding to it. "We have got you, sir. Stay with us." Ethan hears it, not as words, but as tone, something steady to follow, something that does not drift. His eyes open slightly, unfocused but aware enough to recognize shapes moving around him, shadows against the growing light. His lips part again, but no sound comes this time. He does not need to speak. Not yet. The man closest to him adjusts the blanket, then checks his pulse, his breathing, each movement practiced, efficient, but never cold. Another rescuer secures a line above, the rope sliding down in a controlled arc, anchoring their position to something stable beyond the edge. The mountain does not forgive carelessness, and they know it. Ghost shifts slightly as the rope lands nearby, his ears flicking at the sound, but he does not move away. He stays close, always within reach, always positioned so that Ethan is never alone in the space between strangers and safety. The scent of metal and canvas mixes with the sharp, clean air, creating something new, something that signals change. One of the rescuers glances toward Ghost again, a brief moment of recognition passing between them. He stayed with him. The man says quietly, not as a question, but as an understanding. The other nods once, eyes still focused on Ethan. Looks like it. There is no surprise in his voice, only respect. Ethan's breathing steadies further as they work, each adjustment bringing him closer to something stable, something that will hold. The cold still lingers, but it no longer feels endless. Ghost lowers his head again, resting it gently against Ethan's shoulder, careful not to interfere, just close enough to remind him of what has never changed. The rope is secured, the harness prepared, movements aligning into a rhythm that mirrors the quiet persistence that kept Ethan alive through the night. One rescuer kneels closer, speaking softly now, not because Ethan needs instructions, but because presence matters. "We are going to lift you out of here. You are doing just fine." Ethan's fingers tighten slightly beneath the blanket, a small response, but enough. He hears the voice. He follows it. Above them, the sky has cleared further, the fog lifting in slow strands that reveal more of the cliffside, more of the path that leads back to the world they came from. The distance is still there, measured in steep rock and careful steps, but it no longer feels impossible. Ghost senses the shift before it fully happens, the subtle change in posture, in focus, in the way the rescuers prepare to move. He rises slowly, stepping back just enough to give them space, but never turning away, never losing sight of Ethan. The harness is placed with care, straps tightened, checked, adjusted again. Every movement is deliberate, every second accounted for. The man at the rope gives a signal, a quiet nod upward, and the line responds, tension building gradually, lifting not just weight, but the fragile thread of this moment toward something safer. Ethan's body shifts slightly as the lift begins, the sensation pulling him from the ground he has known for hours. His eyes open a fraction more, enough to catch a glimpse of light above, brighter now, clearer, something to move toward. Ghost steps forward instinctively, following the motion, his body aligning with the ascent as if he too is being pulled upward by the same unseen force. He does not bark. He does not panic. He simply stays. One of the rescuers reaches toward him briefly, guiding him back just enough to keep the movement clear, but there is no resistance, only understanding. Ghost adjusts, stepping alongside, tracking every inch Ethan rises, his gaze never breaking, his presence unwavering. The mountain releases them slowly, reluctantly, as if aware that something it almost claimed is now slipping away. The rope holds steady, the men above guiding with practiced control, every movement coordinated, every second measured. And through it all, Ghost remains exactly where he has always chosen to be, close enough to follow, close enough to guard, close enough to ensure that even as the distance grows between ground and sky, between danger and safety, one thing does not change. He does not leave. Not now. Not ever. The rope rises inch by inch, steady as breath, carrying Ethan upward through. The thinning veil of fog while the world above sharpens into something real again. The cold air shifts as elevation changes, less heavy now, touched by the faint warmth of a morning that has fully arrived. Hands guide him carefully as he reaches the top, boots scraping lightly against gravel. The edge of the cliff no longer a boundary, but a crossing point between what almost ended and what still remains. They lower him onto solid ground with practiced care, easing the tension from the line, adjusting the blanket around him as the wind moves differently up here, less trapped, more open, carrying the scent of pine and sunlit stone. Ghost appears seconds later, emerging over the ridge with a controlled climb, his body moving with quiet strength, eyes fixed only on Ethan, ignoring everything else until he is close enough to see him clearly again. He steps forward without hesitation, closing the distance, pressing his head gently against Ethan's side, as if confirming something that never needed doubt. The rescuers allow it, stepping back just enough, recognizing that this bond is not something to interrupt. Ethan's eyes open slightly more now, still heavy, still fighting to stay present, but aware enough to feel the familiar weight against him, the steady presence that followed him where no one else could. His breathing steadies further, each inhale deeper, each exhale more certain, as if the ground beneath him has reminded his body how to trust again. One of the men speaks into a radio, voice calm but clear, relaying coordinates, condition, status, the language of rescue that turns chaos into order. Somewhere in the distance, the faint thump of rotor blades begins to form, low at first, then building, cutting through the open sky with a rhythm that signals arrival, not urgency, but resolution. Ghost lifts his head at the sound, ears turning toward it, but he does not move away. He stays exactly where he is, his body close to Ethan, his focus unbroken. The wind picks up slightly as the helicopter approaches, sweeping across the ridge, bending grass, lifting dust, turning the quiet morning into motion. The rescuers move with it, preparing, securing, coordinating, their movements fluid, practiced, without wasted motion. Ethan's eyes track the shifting light above, the shadow of the aircraft crossing briefly over him, the sound filling the space that had been silent for so long. He does not flinch. He does not pull away. He simply breathes, holding on to the one constant that has not changed since the fall. Ghost remains beside him, steady as ever, his fur moving slightly in the wind, his posture firm, grounded, as if anchoring Ethan to the moment even as everything around them begins to move faster. A stretcher is brought forward, placed carefully beside him, straps prepared, movements precise but gentle, each action guided by the same quiet respect that has followed them since the first voice reached the canyon below. Ethan is lifted with care, supported at every point, the transition smooth, controlled, never rushed. His hand shifts slightly beneath the blanket, searching, and without hesitation, Ghost moves closer, placing himself within reach, allowing that contact to remain, even as the situation changes around them. The rotor noise grows louder, the air pressing down now, strong but controlled, a force that signals departure. One of the rescuers kneels briefly beside Ghost, placing a steady hand near his shoulder, not holding him back, just guiding, just acknowledging. He is coming with us. The man says quietly, more to the others than the dog, but the meaning carries anyway. Ghost does not need translation. He steps forward as the stretcher is lifted, aligning himself with Ethan's side, matching the movement, matching the pace, refusing any distance that is not necessary. The helicopter door opens, the interior waiting, not as an end, but as a continuation. They load Ethan carefully, securing him in place, adjusting straps, checking everything twice, then stepping back just enough for the next motion. Ghost pauses at the threshold for half a second, looking up into the space, then back at Ethan, his decision already made before the moment even arrived. He steps inside without hesitation, positioning himself close, low, steady, his body angled in a way that keeps him near but out of the way, instinctively understanding the space. The door closes, sealing them inside, muting the outside world into a distant blur of motion and light. As the helicopter lifts, the ground falls away once more, but this time it is different. This time, it is not a fall into silence. It is a rise toward something that still holds. Ethan's eyes close again, not from weakness, but from release, from the quiet understanding that he did not face the edge alone, and he does not leave it alone either. And beside him, unwavering, unchanged, Ghost settles into the steady rhythm of the flight, his presence as constant as breath, as certain as the fact that some bonds do not break, no matter how far the fall. The sound of the rotor fades into a steady hum, no longer sharp, no longer urgent, just a constant presence that fills the space like distant thunder rolling across an open sky. Inside the helicopter, the air feels different, warmer, controlled, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and metal instead of pine and frost. Ethan lies still beneath the secured straps, the thermal blanket tucked around him, rising and falling gently with each breath that now comes easier, more certain, as if his body is remembering how to stay. His eyes remain closed, but not in the same way as before. This is not the silence of being lost. This is the quiet of someone who has crossed something and is no longer alone on the other side. Ghost remains close, his body low against the floor, positioned near Ethan's side, his head angled just enough to keep him in view at all times. His ears flick occasionally at the unfamiliar sounds, the vibration beneath his paws, the shifting light through the small windows, but his focus does not waver. He has followed into stranger places than this. A medic kneels beside Ethan, checking his pulse again, adjusting a line, speaking softly to him even though there is no clear response yet. "You are doing good, stay with me," the man says, his voice steady, grounded, the kind of tone that does not demand attention but earns it. Ethan's fingers move slightly beneath the blanket, a small response, but enough to be noticed. The medic nods once, more to himself than anyone else, acknowledging progress in the smallest form. Across from them, another crew member glances toward Ghost, watching the dog for a moment before offering a quiet remark. That dog did not leave him, not for a second. The medic follows his gaze, a brief pause passing between them. "Some do not," he replies, his voice low, almost reflective, before returning his attention to Ethan. The helicopter tilts slightly as it adjusts course, the horizon shifting beyond the window, revealing stretches of forest and winding roads far below, the world continuing in quiet contrast to what has just unfolded. The mountains that once held them now recede into the distance, their sharp edges softened by morning light. Inside, time feels slower, measured by breath and heartbeat rather than miles. Ethan's lips part slightly, his breathing deepening again, and for a brief moment, his eyes open just enough to catch a flicker of movement, a shape beside him, familiar even through the haze. He does not need clarity to recognize it. His voice comes out as a whisper, rough but real. "Still here." It is not a question. It never was. Ghost responds instantly, lifting his head, a low, steady sound leaving his chest, not loud, not urgent, just present, just enough to answer without words. Ethan's hand shifts again beneath the blanket, searching, and this time it finds fur, warm and solid beneath his fingers. The contact lingers, fragile but certain, a connection that does not require strength to hold. The medic notices but does not interfere. He adjusts the blanket slightly, ensuring the hand remains where it is, understanding without needing explanation. Outside, the sky opens wider, clouds thinning into pale streaks, sunlight stretching across the land in long, quiet lines. The helicopter moves steadily forward, carrying them away from the edge, away from the silence that almost claimed them, towards something that has not yet been fully defined but already feels different. Ghost settles again, lowering his head, his body relaxing just enough to conserve energy, but never enough to lose awareness. His breathing matches Ethan's once more, steady, aligned, as if they share the same rhythm even now. The hum of the engine continues, constant, reassuring in its own way, a reminder that movement is happening, that distance is being covered, that the story is still unfolding. No one speaks for a while after that. There is no need. The moment does not call for words. It holds something quieter, something that exists in the space between survival and understanding. The medic finishes his checks, sitting back slightly, watching the monitors, watching the man who should not have made it this far, but did. The other crew member glances once more at the dog, then out the window, as if measuring the distance between what was and what is now. And in the center of it all, between machine and sky, between past and what comes next, Ethan rests, not alone, not forgotten. His hands still resting in the fur of the one who followed him into the fall and refused to leave, even when the world above had already moved on. The helicopter begins its descent long before the ground is visible. The change felt first in the subtle shift of motion, the steady hum lowering in pitch, the air inside tightening just slightly as gravity begins to reclaim its place. Outside, the landscape transforms from distant shapes into defined lines, a clearing emerging between tall pines, marked by painted circles and waiting figures who stand ready but do not rush. The landing is controlled, precise, a gentle return rather than an abrupt stop, the skids touching earth with a soft firmness that signals arrival without disturbance. Inside, nothing changes in urgency, only in direction. The door slides open and fresh air moves in, carrying a different scent now, warmer, touched with asphalt and distant engine oil, mixed faintly with the clean sharpness of morning. The medics move first, unfastening, preparing, their motions practiced and fluid, transitioning from air to ground without breaking rhythm. Ethan remains still but present, his breathing steady, his body held carefully as the stretcher is lifted once more, carried out into the open where light falls fully across him for the first time since before the fall. It touches his face gently, not harsh, just enough to reveal the quiet strain he carries, and the equally quiet strength that is not left. Ghost moves with them, stepping out onto solid ground, his paws adjusting instantly to the new surface, his eyes scanning once, then returning immediately to Ethan, as if everything else is background noise. The team receives them with calm efficiency, voices low, purposeful, not hurried, not chaotic. A gurney waits nearby, and the transfer is smooth, controlled, every motion guided by care rather than urgency. "We have him," one voice says, steady and assured, and for a moment, that statement carries more weight than anything else in the air. Ghost follows closely, not interfering, not resisting, simply aligning himself with the movement, his presence constant as they begin toward the waiting ambulance. The doors open wide, revealing a space filled with light, equipment, and quiet readiness. Ethan is secured inside, straps adjusted, monitors connected, each step building a layer of stability around him. Ghost pauses at the threshold again, not out of hesitation, but awareness. Reading the space, the movement, the people. A hand gestures gently, inviting, not forcing. He steps in. Inside, the air is warmer, enclosed, filled with the steady rhythm of machines that measure what cannot be seen. The doors close behind them, sealing out the open sky, replacing it with something focused, contained. The vehicle begins to move, slow at first, then with purpose, tires rolling over pavement in a rhythm that replaces the hum of the helicopter. Ethan's eyes open again, longer this time, his gaze unfocused but searching, finding shapes, light, and finally, the one presence that has not changed since the edge of the cliff. Ghost is there, positioned beside him, steady as ever, his eyes meeting Ethan's with a quiet certainty that does not need explanation. Ethan's lips move slightly, forming words that barely rise above breath. Did not leave. Ghost does not respond with sound this time. He simply remains, his presence answering in a way words never could. One of the paramedics notices the exchange, a brief glance passing between human and animal, understanding settling without question. He adjusts a blanket, checks a reading, then steps back, allowing that space to exist untouched. Outside the windows, the world moves by in soft blurs of green and gray, trees and road blending into a steady forward motion that carries them away from the mountain and everything it held. Inside, the pace is controlled, measured, every second accounted for, every breath observed. Ethan's hand shifts again, weak but deliberate, and this time it finds Ghost without searching, fingers resting lightly in his fur, holding on not out of fear, but out of recognition. The bond remains, unchanged by distance, by fall, by everything that tried to separate them. The ambulance continues forward, siren silent. No need to rush what is already secured. The morning grows brighter outside, sunlight stretching across the horizon, touching everything it reaches with quiet clarity. And inside, Between the steady pulse of machines and the soft movement of hands that care, something settles into place. Not victory. Not yet. But something close. Something that feels like it might be enough to begin again. The ambulance slows as it turns into the hospital entrance, tires rolling over smooth concrete. The motion steady, controlled, almost quiet compared to everything that came before. The doors open with a soft mechanical sound, and daylight floods in again. Brighter now, fuller, no longer filtered through fog or glass. Hands move in sync, unlocking, lifting, guiding, transferring Ethan from one surface to another with the same care that carried him from the mountain. The world around him becomes sharper in pieces, not all at once, but enough. The scent changes again, clean and clinical now, touched with antiseptic and something sterile that signals safety more than anything else. Voices surround him, calm, focused, not loud, not rushed, just present, each word placed where it needs to be. On 3. Easy now, you are doing good. The rhythm of care continues, unbroken. Ghost steps down from the ambulance as well, his paws meeting the ground with quiet certainty, his gaze immediately finding Ethan again, tracking the movement as the gurney rolls forward through sliding doors that open without hesitation. Inside, the air is warmer, still controlled. Lights above cast a steady glow, illuminating polished floors and clean walls that reflect motion without distortion. Everything here is designed to hold life in place, to keep it from slipping away. Ghost follows without needing direction, staying just behind, never too far, never out of sight. A nurse glances down at him, surprise flickering briefly, then softening into something else when she sees the way he moves, the way he stays. No one stops him. No one needs to. They understand. Ethan's eyes open again as the ceiling lights pass above him in slow repetition, one after another, a pattern that pulls him forward, grounding him in the present. The sounds shift around him, machines, footsteps, distant voices, all blending into something steady, something structured. His breathing remains even, his chest rising with more strength now, as if each inhale carries a little more certainty than the last. They guide him into a room, the motion smooth, controlled, the transition seamless. The gurney stops, locks into place, and hands move again, adjusting, checking, ensuring that everything aligns with what is needed next. Ghost pauses at the doorway for a moment, not from uncertainty, but from awareness, reading the space, the people, the movement. Then he steps inside, quiet, deliberate, positioning himself near the bed where Ethan now rests. He lowers himself slowly, settling into place as if he has done this before, as if he understands that this is where he is meant to be now. Ethan turns his head slightly, just enough, to see him clearly for the first time since the fall. His eyes hold there, longer this time, focus returning in fragments that begin to connect. The fog is lifting, not just outside, but within him. His voice comes again, still soft, still fragile, but stronger than before. You stayed. The words hang in the air, simple, incomplete, but carrying everything they need to. Ghost does not move closer. He does not need to. His presence is already there, steady, unwavering, answering in silence. A doctor steps in, reviewing, assessing, speaking quietly with the team, confirming what has already been understood in pieces. Stable. The word is not spoken loudly, but it settles into the room with weight, with meaning. Stable means he is here. Stable means the line held. Stable means something was not lost. Outside the window, the morning continues, sunlight stretching across the hospital grounds, touching trees, pavement, distant buildings, everything moving forward without pause. Inside, time slows again, but not in the same way as before. This is not the stillness of waiting. This is the quiet of recovery, of something rebuilding itself piece by piece. Ethan's hand shifts again, weaker now from exhaustion, but guided by something deeper than strength, and it finds Ghost once more, resting lightly in his fur. The contact remains, steady, unbroken. Ghost lowers his head slightly, aligning himself with that touch, his breathing calm, his presence constant. No fear, no urgency, just staying. The room settles into a rhythm, machines pulsing softly, footsteps passing in the hallway, voices distant and controlled. And in the center of it all, two lives that should have been separated by distance, by fall, by silence, remain side by side, unchanged in the one way that matters. Some things do not need explanation. Some things do not need to be spoken aloud. They exist in the space between actions, between breaths, between moments that almost ended and those that continue anyway. And as the light grows stronger, filling the room with quiet warmth, Ethan closes his eyes once more, not from weakness, but from trust, knowing that when he opens them again, the one who followed him into the dark will still be there, exactly where he has always been, exactly where he chose to stay.